I've been a sheriff for 7 years now, and my vision on life completely changed after that. I discovered the difference between movies and reality with my own experience. I really have to be brave enough to adjust to the dark and must love the quiet to become a sheriff. Furthermore, I saw things that people would only hear in the local news or through rumors, things that most people find hard to believe. That night, I was on a highway near County Road 42. The air was cold, and my skin was getting dry from the arid breeze. The sky was moonlit with long shadows cast around the fields. I was doing my usual patrols and cruising in the absolute darkness. But then I saw something in the woods. It was a faint glow coming from the old farm. It was unusual. The farm had been abandoned for years. I quietly killed the engine and slowly started approaching. The silence was thick. The only thing that can be heard was the distant hoot of an owl. I cautiously started walking into the woods, slowly approaching the farm. The glow was getting brighter and I started hearing fire crackling. Then I saw everything. There was a man sitting by the fire. He was wearing a worn jacket and a filthy hat. I stepped forward, the dry leaves crunching under my boots. He turned back to see who it was, his face illuminated by the flickering flames. It was a young man. I informed him that it was the sheriff's office, but he just stood there without giving me any response. I asked if he could show me his ID. He still didn't answer, just kept staring at me. I asked him again in a dominant tone that I needed some ID. A wave of fear rushed over him. He was left frozen. I asked him if he was okay, but then he started running toward the clearing. I ran behind trying to stop him. He knew this place very well. He was running in the dark without any hesitation. I followed him with my flashlight beam bouncing through the woods. Then I heard an engine running on my left. Before I could reach him, the guy took a turn and started speeding through the narrow road. I kept pointing my gun at him, yelling for him to stop, but he was going into the darkness, leaving the dust behind. Without wasting more time, I sprinted toward the cruiser. A rush of adrenaline coursed through me. I knew I had to catch him. I turned the engine and floored it, the cruiser roaring down the road. It had become a chase. I knew how the situation was, so I called for reinforcements. I caught up to the car, but the car turned into a narrow dirt road, disappearing into the dust cloud. I followed, my headlights cutting through dirt. However, it was still not enough because the car was gone. I slammed on the brakes, my cruiser skidding to a stop. I tried to find the car from inside the cabin, but I didn't see anything. I stepped out of the cruiser, my hand resting in my sidearm. I knew he was watching me from somewhere, but I didn't know where he was. I looked over the field, but no sign of the guy. I was only able to see some cactuses and small blackthorn trees in the distance. I was thinking to myself that maybe I had lost him, so I was going to the station to issue a bolo on him. The car didn't have any license plate on it, but I remembered his face very well as I was heading toward my cruiser to head to the station. But when I turned back, I was shocked. The guy was standing in front of me. He was in between me and my car. I aimed my Glock right at him. I told him to put his hands behind his back, but he was still not moving an inch or giving any replies. I was confused. He should have been cowering in fear after seeing a gun pointed right at him. But just then I heard a click behind me. I realized it was a trap. They were trying to lure me. The young guy was the bait, and I took it without thinking. The other guy came from behind me holding an old rifle. He pointed it right at me, telling me to drop my gun. I was panicking, my life flashing before my eyes. This type of experience was entirely new for me. The man yelled at me, wavering his rifle. He told me I should drop the gun. I hesitated at first, but I knew I couldn't do anything. Without any other options, I lowered my hands, dropping the gun as he wanted. I was alone. There was no way for retreat. I tried to stall for time and asked what they had wanted, but the old guy told me not to say anything or he would shoot. I was checking around the clearing, trying to find any hope of escape route. I hoped reinforcements were on their way, but I couldn't count on that to arrive in time. I stayed quiet, the silence amplifying the sound of my own heavy breathing. I tried to reason with him, saying whatever he wants is not going to happen. He yelled at me again and told me not to say another word. There was no way to escape, no way to reason with the guy. I took a step closer, hoping to get a better look at him. He shouted, ordering me to stop moving, and then I heard a loud bang deafening me. My ears rang from the force of that sound. The sound echoed through the clearing like thunder shattering the sky. It was a gunshot. My life flashed before my eyes. Terrified, I braced myself for the impact. I held my chest as hard as I could, but when I looked down, I didn't see what I expected. There was no blood on my chest, but the old man was screaming, clutching his bloody hand in pain. Then I saw multiple footsteps approaching me from the distance. They were cops, hiding behind the oak trees, waiting for the moment to strike. I realized they shot the man's hand, preventing him from pulling the trigger. We arrested both of them. The cops asked me to come to the station, but I refused. I went straight home. My hands were shaking as I took off my clothes. I was traumatized. I couldn't believe I made it out alive. I didn't sleep that night. I kept smoking on the porch. The next day, I woke up on the porch with ashes all over me. I took a shower and went to the station. My friends at the station found out that those two weren't just some random thieves. They were part of something big. The beat-up sedan wasn't just a getaway vehicle. It was a rolling evidence locker. There was money, some gold, and a map with locations spread all across 4 counties. Locations that corresponded to some recent carjacking and even a couple of cold case homicides. I cannot tell you anything else due to the protocols, but we found a jackpot worth of unsolved cases, and after some weeks we pieced everything together. It's been 3 years since that incident, but I still can't believe what happened. My buddy Jake and I worked at a nearby Walmart store. We had known each other since 5th grade. Between the two of us, he's always been a hothead, but I liked that about him. We'd been living in Cosby our entire lives and knew everything about each other. One day, Jake suggested we should go somewhere, take a break before we died here. I wasn't much of a fun guy myself, but after hearing him, it felt right. So after some hesitation, I agreed. I asked Jake what he was planning. He suggested a road trip would be a great idea. So as soon as we got our next PTO, we started planning the trip. Jake suggested we take his car instead of mine. He had recently bought a Corolla, and it's a pretty reliable car. He said his car would save us some gas money compared to mine. I didn't argue. I told him I was okay if he drove the car. We left our houses at dawn to welcome the change. Jake blasted some 90s music, and the trip started. After some driving and having a lot of fun, Jake pulled over at a turn on the road where a beautiful waterfall cascaded down. He then started getting all philosophical about nature and said we should admire its beauty. I told him that it's his inner poet speaking and maybe he should think about his career choice. We headed back in the evening with a sigh. We wished we could do this more frequently. It was getting darker, along with a rapid drop in temperature. Everything was getting foggier, and cars were now only visible through the headlights. After some time, light snow started dusting the windshield. The only thing visible was the occasional glint of Coyote's eyes in the distance. Jake was driving nonstop, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. I barely slept last night, so I decided to take a nap and told Jake to wake me up if he wanted to switch. But just as I was falling asleep, the Corolla started jerking. Then I heard the engine sputtering. Jake started pressing the gas over and over, but the car was completely dead. No matter how many times he tried, it wouldn't turn on. As we were getting out of the car, the dashboard lights flickered, and then we saw smoke coming from the engine. We opened the hood and checked if the car was on fire. Neither of us knew how to fix a car, and the engine looked totally normal to us. Jake went inside and tried to start the car again, but no matter what, the car wouldn't start. Frustrated, Jake started kicking a tire. I regretted not taking my car, but it wasn't usual for a Corolla to turn off in the middle of the road. It was inevitable. We were stranded in the middle of nowhere. No cell phone service, no passing cars. We really were in trouble. We stayed inside the car, but without the heater, the cabin was getting colder every minute. Our breath started fogging the windows. Jake then declared that if we didn't do something, we would probably freeze to death. After shivering in the cold, we realized we were going to freeze to death. But to our shock, we saw headlights appearing in the rearview mirror. Then a rusty Maverick pulled over in front of us. An elderly woman stepped out of the car. She approached us and asked if we were stuck. Jake explained everything about how the car stopped. She introduced herself as Sarah and told us she could help. She said that it had happened to her once, which is why she helps others stuck in the snow. Sarah seemed genuine, but something about her felt off. It may sound a little paranoid, but people don't usually pull over for strangers if they are alone. However, it shouldn't be surprising that she was just a kind-hearted lady trying to help us out. But then Sarah told us that her husband was a mechanic, but he would only fix our car if we paid extra. So that's why she was helping us. She was just finding some customers on the way. Jake and I agreed and jumped inside the truck. The truck felt warm, which was what we needed for a few hours. We relaxed while Sarah was driving us to her home. After some time, I started noticing something. Sarah kept staring at us through the mirror while she was driving. Then I saw her using her phone for something. I was confused, thinking what she was doing. But strangely, she kept looking at us over and over. I tried to tell Jake about it somehow, but he was busy enjoying the warmth. When I looked at the window, I saw tall trees surrounding us. We were not on the highway anymore. Sarah was taking us somewhere else. I asked her if we were going the right way. She said that it was a shortcut to her house, but the way she said that with an emotionless voice, unlike when she first met us, it gave me chills. I told Sarah to stop the truck. She completely ignored me. Jake asked me what happened. I yelled at Sarah, telling her to stop the truck. She tightened her grip and told us that we were not far away from her house. The warm cabin grew cold. I exchanged a terrified look with Jake. We thought about how to get out of the situation. I knew we were in deep trouble. The silence in the truck was thick, punctuated only by the rumble of the engine. As Sarah slowed down for a sharp curve, I acted on instinct, grabbing her from behind. I told her to stop the truck or I would choke her to the end. She slammed on the brakes, struggling for air. The truck swerved and started slowing down. Jake took the keys of her truck and threw it in the dark. We jumped out and started running through the dense trees. After coming to a distance, we saw Sarah talking to two more people with guns. We were right. Sarah was trying to lure us. The two started running towards us. They were searching us with flashlights. We stood still as trees in the cold winter. They were shouting, telling us they came here to help. We knew it was all a lie, but then Jake stepped on a dry twig and it snapped. We were found. Terrified, we started to run. The men followed behind us. They were yelling at us to stop or they would shoot us, but we didn't. We came to the clearing and headed toward the highway. Panting, we tried to look back, but we didn't see anyone. It was as if the two men had disappeared. It didn't make sense. Why did they stop following us? I was thinking if they were waiting to sneak up on us. But then my gaze shifted across the other side of the road. It was a police station. We understood why they'd stopped. Without thinking, we ran into the station. Two officers were sitting at their desks, half asleep. We told them everything. The officers were kind and gave us warm blankets. We were relieved. After some time, the search unit came and we took them to the scene. But there was no sign of Sarah or anyone. Even our broken down car was gone, as if it had never been there. It's been 10 years, but we never found the car or any trace of Sarah or the two men. I was a nobody when I was young. I lived with my Uncle Joe in a small house, and my Aunt Connie was not a generous woman either. I know what it's like to be a burden to others. I lived in the spare room tucked under the stairs. It was barely the size of a closet, but back then I used to think of myself as Harry Potter. I had to get the chores done in order to stay there. Dishes, clothes, mopping the floor, cleaning the bathroom, taking out the trash, mowing the lawn. I was in charge of everything. It was an exchange of labor for shelter, and it was hell for me. But the only one in the house who didn't treat me like a slave was my cousin Ava. We were really close. We used to share everything, finding comfort in each other's company. You could say I didn't end up being screwed up because of her, but Ava had to leave for college. Her college was 200 miles away. She moved there to a rented apartment with her boyfriend. After she left the house, it hadn't been the same. The house became cold and silent. Uncle Joe bought a dark blue Accord for Ava when she turned 18. Now it was just sitting in the garage, gathering dust. I asked Ava if it was okay for me to drive the car. She just handed me the keys and told me it was mine for as long as I wanted it. But my uncle had a different idea. He saw an opportunity after Ava handed me the keys. He said it's mine if I pay them a small rent for the car and do the maintenance with my own money. Ava argued, but she couldn't convince them. I thanked her and agreed to them. I was thinking maybe somehow I wouldn't be a burden to them anymore. I told them I would give them a small amount every single month if they let me use the car. That car was a reliable one. I used to think of it as a means of escape from the hell I lived in. I heard from my friends there was an old lady who needed a driver, someone to take her to appointments. Most people avoided her because she was demanding and called at all hours with a sharp and impatient voice. I hesitated at first too, but when I met her I found out that she had a chronic heart condition that flared up any time. and she had to be taken to the clinic right away. I didn't mind it. I needed the money, and she was kind to me in her own way. Underneath the grumpy stuff, she would talk for hours about her life, and I would share mine. I helped her with heavy groceries and stuff out of a sense of compassion. One day, my uncle gave me a small brown package and ordered me to deliver it to Ava. He also mentioned he had wired her some money and would find out if I asked her for money. I didn't tell him anything, just nodded and went out of his sight. I decided to visit Ava with the package. It's been a few months since I saw her. I traveled all the way to her apartment in the Accord. Her face lit up when she saw me. She then introduced me to her boyfriend. His name was Dan, and he was a tall, lanky guy and very shy. The apartment wasn't that flashy, but it was okay enough. Ava made coffee for all of us, and we had a lot of catching up to do. As I prepared to leave, Ava hugged me and apologized for how her parents treat me. I downplayed it and said I was thankful to her parents for letting me live with them. The drive back was long and lonely. I'd been driving for 2 solid hours with the radio as my only companion. I was tired, my eyes feeling heavy. I was thinking of grabbing a coffee from one of the diners, but then suddenly a car coming from the left intersection collided with me. At first, I didn't realize what happened. All I heard was a loud bang, and then the world started spinning. It felt like the world exploded in a blinding flash while everything was getting darker. It was getting hard for me to breathe. I noticed smoke coming from under the mangled hood. While I was getting ready to get out of my car, I heard the sound of an engine starting behind me. It was an old pickup truck. The engine started roaring. The truck started coming toward me with speed. Then it slammed into my car. I started feeling a sharp pain in my back. Then it hit me again. The truck started pushing me back toward the river. I was screaming, confused at what was happening. I was panicking. The doors were jammed. I didn't have the strength to break the window. The car sounded like it would crumple in mere moments. I tried to start the engine, but it completely gave up. The truck kept pushing me toward the edge of the road. I thought maybe this was the end. I started hearing angry screams from the truck. Whoever was inside the truck, he was mad at me for wrecking his truck. Later, I woke up in a hospital bed with machines and an oxygen mask attached to me. I had a plaster cast on my neck, right arm, and some bandages on my knee. I shouted for help and a nurse came to check. She informed me that a cop would come after a few minutes and I should not move too much for my own safety. Then the cop came through the door. He informed me about the truck owner. I finally learned why he'd done it. It wasn't just the anger that I'd slammed into his truck, even though that was part of it. He was furious because he saw my out-of-state plates, assuming I was some drunk rich kid ruining his day. So in that moment, fueled by anger and a dark, twisted sense of justice, he decided to make me pay. I couldn't believe that people like him even existed.